If your customers aren't rabid fans of your business, how do you fix it? Do you do some research, analyze your processes, try the latest management methodology? Maybe you start with your staff. I'm Bryon Morrison, CEO of Proxxy, your executive multiplier. And in this episode of the Leaders List, my co-founder, Tony Amador, and I are going to answer some of those questions and share how you can craft an exceptional customer experience that drives loyalty and profits. Okay. So, Tony, we're talking in this episode of the Leaders List about service design, basically how companies do what they do. And when it's in a service environment, so it's not like a manufacturing environment where we're putting together the nuts and bolts and making sure that the assembly line works. This is understanding, how do I create a service that makes companies love the business and want to do more business with them? Right. And so, a lot of companies don't have the luxury that we did in Proxxy. We were creating a category when we were thinking about executive enablement. Right. We were trying to figure out, like, how do you build a company to get them to a point of liquidity that makes them really happy? And so we were able to think about the employee source. We were thinking about the experience for the customer. We were able to think about and design a unique model that didn't exist to solve a specific problem. Most companies we work with that are SMBs, CEOs, founders, they don't really have that opportunity. They're coming to us and saying, I have been doing this, or I do this, and I need to improve it. What's a few examples of, what are the components of that process for us when in Proxxy, when we think about service design? Where do we start with that?
Yeah, I mean, right away, right? The clients start telling us those issues, and we start on, identifying things like, well, do they have a management methodology, and if so, what is it, and are they using it, right? Are they really living by it, or they just say that they are? And then customer journey comes up pretty early too, because when you're talking about service and all the places where you can screw that up, well, you got to think about that customer journey. And again, most clients, especially in that small and medium-sized business, haven't really thought about all the parts of their customer journey. So they have some of it nailed and other parts they haven't really talked about enough. Just KPIs in general, I'd say too, just the idea of what are you measuring? What have you thought about? What are you keeping track of so that we're being successful, or we have places where we can fit. And then employee engagement is the other thing that I start wanting to hear about and ask about pretty early on as well.
I love that about you. So the fact that you always come back to the employee engagement is kind of interesting, because if we're thinking about what's the experience in the service design, what most people think about is customer journey. Right. What am I delivering? How does that come across to our customers? And actually, and I'm a firm believer that is kind of where it starts. Mm-hmm. However, management methodologies are really about the employee engagement and keeping the employee involved in that process. And so talk a little bit about how you've approached and why you start with employee engagement or think really heavily about that.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from a few places, right? One, of course, my background in client satisfaction and employee satisfaction, and doing that for many years, it's ingrained in just thinking about how happy are your employees, how happy are your clients, and why, right? But then when we went to Omnicom University and we were taught by Harvard Business School professors about the service profit chain, and specifically by the writer of the service profit chain, and the whole idea of the best way is to have happy employees, which drives happy customers, which drives your profits. And, I remember sitting in class and just thinking, oh, wow, that's why I do what I do right there. Nobody ever talked about it that way to me before, right? I was just out measuring client satisfaction, employee satisfaction. And I would tell them, yes, you should improve that. But I didn't have the connector until I had service profit chain in my hand. And so upon learning about that, it just put me in that spot where this matters so much, that you can do customer journey. You can do all these pieces and they can be perfect. But if you don't have the employees that want to deliver on the journey the way you outlined it, it's not going to all come to fruition the way you want it to.
Yeah. Jim Heskett, Len Schlesinger, we learned specifically from two of the three authors from that. And it really is kind of the granddaddy of operating systems in my mind, from a I mean, that was back in the 90s. But incredibly important to understand the links in the service profit chain and how you can get to real discernment of value when you understand each of those links, and then a happy employee all the way to a loyal customer, which, you know, also kind of changed my whole mindset around how you track and measure marketing.
Right.
Because before it was like, well, by campaign, how did that campaign do? Then you come back to the whole concept of lifetime customer value.
Mm-hmm.
And it just changes your entire perspective on it. So it's the long game, right? It's thinking about like, how am I really going to make an impact over a long period of time?
Yeah.
And so what are some of the ways that you measure that success? Because I know that we've implemented this many times with customers.
Yeah.
How have you done that in Proxxy and seen that kind of result play out?
Yeah. Yeah. Specifically, just thinking about a client in particular, you know, we were looking at, they didn't really have a lot of metrics. They didn't have management methodology. You start plugging in pieces, right? Because there's so many things to do that it tends to be that a client can't just go, okay, we're going to plug in EOS as a management methodology, and that's going to fix everything. It's not really how we roll about it. And so we're more likely to take some pieces of that, get that started, get some KPIs, get that started, go measure employee engagement, understand that. So I think about this, one of our clients, we measure employee engagement. They were at about 50% employee engagement. And, you know, when you look out there at the metrics, they talk about, you know, companies will talk about 30 to 40% might be the benchmark. And that's well and good, but I've seen lots of companies at 70 and 80% employee engagement. Mm-hmm. And so I tend to think about, okay, 50 is just opportunity to let's do better. So we immediately using the survey, identified 3 big areas that needed help. And it was employee accountability and training and getting some recognition. So we understood those things and really dove in, figuring out, okay, what exactly are the pieces to that? And then systematically put things in place to help and improve each area. So while we're also doing other initiatives and we're doing better with metrics and we're doing better with some delivery items, we're also understanding our employees. And what we understood was that they weren't quite as happy as they could be. And at that same time, what I also knew was happening was turnover was high because I knew we didn't have a good training program, but anybody we hired, we couldn't keep. Because but we also didn't set goals for them. We didn't train them right. There are a lot of pieces to it. So it's hard to identify all of it. But like usual, the staff knew. The staff knew what the problems were. They don't know the solutions always, but they know the problems. So once we knew that and we could put solutions in place, a year later, we measured again and they were at 75% employee engagement. On top of that, not only did engagement go up, retention went up, that profits went up, and revenue and profits both went up. So everything was moving in the right direction. And then you just keep on adding pieces, right? And so just keep on managing better, having the client journey better. We've improved retention. We've also improved overall, talking about lifetime value. That was another piece that we started looking at the data saying, okay, well, these people, here's the customers. Let's figure out some tiering structure, which didn't have before, put some tiering structure in place and started realizing that the top tier were the most loyal. Well, we start digging into that and they were buying more services from us. And they were really valuing who we were trying to be. They're a company that wants to be a consultative seller, right? They want to give you the right thing for you. And if you find the right customer for that, they will value that and they will buy. At the same time, we were selling to anybody that came along, and the people that weren't valuing consultative selling were just doing transaction-based, buying one product. The next year when the contract was up, they go buy the cheapest product somewhere else. So we started identifying that lifetime value, and that if we could find the right customers and sell them the right products, they would stay a really long time. And then we would understand. So we'd feel the impact of all of that. And that's what's happened over the last 5 years.
It's funny because there's a natural process to think about the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, right? Mm-hmm. 80% of my money is going to come from 20% of my customer base. And what we often talk about in Proxxy is Pareto plus.
Right.
95% of your business can come from 5%. And so if you really start to hone that to how am I making an impact that's really going to be favorable for my most important customer, they become much more loyal. And, so that's where we obviously start seeing more referrals. And we see, like you said, value
Yep.
add-on business and higher LTV or lifetime value.
Yep.
But it's so funny and interesting to me that when companies aren't aware that if you change it with people in the beginning, understanding how they are happier and they're going to make your customers happier.
Right.
That's an operating system unto itself.
It is. I mean, and that's a company that's, tripled in size in both people and revenue and profits. Like everything is growing and just continues to do that. I mean, the thing for me, so that's where I always land. I know for you, customer journey is where you tend to jump to. And I love it because the first time I ever heard a customer journey was you explaining that to me years and years ago and walking me through one. And I wondered, if you had a favorite example of that.
Yeah, one of my favorites was working with an agency where we actually ran this experiment where we had one group from their audience, which was the account management and the sales team, went into one room and we had them map out what they thought the customer experience was supposed to be. And then we had the delivery and the ops team in another room on a wall, map that out. And then we had each other switch rooms. And it was fascinating to walk through what they felt was most important in that process. And then, of course, ultimately, we did that with the customers and showed them what we thought was the refined view of what was important. Overnight, it changed that organization because everybody started to appreciate the position that the other group had. They worked together. So we broke down silos between the two groups. I should have mentioned that in the beginning. There was all kinds of war and, and challenge
Super
going
common.
on.
We see it all the time, right? I mean, we see that
exactly,
a lot.
because they just didn't communicate, appreciate, and understand the true delivery to the customer, what had to happen, and how they have to work together to do a great job of delivering that.
Right.
So that literally helped them identify unnecessary steps, how they could go to market way faster and more efficiently. And so it wasn't like the job of the CEO to come in and go, I'm just going to solve this. Or we tend to point at individuals and go, hey, the COO is going to solve that.
Right.
And the reality is exactly what you said. The team knew.
Right.
The team knew what the problem was. Once you put them in a position where they could learn from each other and they could have an open dialogue, they start to identify how they can solve the problem. And then they were invested in it. They cared about how it was going to get done. And like I said, that company went from, all kinds of internal strife and incredibly poor employee engagement and had no customer testimonials. I mean, like the customers would work with them on a transactional basis and that was it.
Right.
And they completely switched their business model to being, actually a retained service model versus doing transactional projects.
Right.
So completely changed their business just by understanding what they do and what the market fit should be.
Yep. That's fantastic.
So
that's always been one of my favorites because it is just showing that you can make changes with the same people. And if they understand the why and the how and what's going to matter to a customer, they can make that difference. I always remember too learning about even the bank when we went to that class about the bank that just hired happy people, right? Just happy people that smiled. And again, it all started there. And this happy people that smile will take care of customers better. And those customers will stay and be loyal and spend more money with you. It just all fits together. And I think that so many of our clients, that point you made too about the leader feels like it's all on them. Right. We find a lot of clients, and especially in founder-led businesses, they feel like they have to fix it. They're the solution somehow. And even then, they'll call Proxxy and want Proxxy to help them be the solution. And I was like, we're going to help you with the solution. It's not going to be because Proxxy and you do something to, this way. It's going to be, let's involve the people. Let's look at all those different inputs and work on multiple things to move the needle. So.
Yeah, I remember that as well. That case study you were talking about, It's deciding what you're going to be bad at.
Right.
That was so great.
Yes.
Like that bank just decided, you know what, we are going to have exceptional customer service. And so they didn't hire financiers. They hired people who were happy and wanted to help.
Right.
And so it's a classic, another classic Harvard case, but highly relevant to
Mhm.
SMBs,
It is.
and so we kind of talked about how we each come at it from different angles and where we
Yeah.
start. If you were a founder and you're in a position where you know that you could do a better job in service design, where would you start?
Yeah, I think customer journey is that spot, right? It is understanding where you're doing well and where you're missing, and really having that. And then, like I said, I think it is making sure you have the right people to then deliver on whatever that journey needs to be. And it may very well be you already have those, and that's fine. Or it might be that you don't have the right people in the right seats to be able to deliver completely. But understanding those pieces, and then while you're doing that, I always get back to, what are your metrics? What are you looking at that are your success metrics, to make sure that you have those identified the right way? Because it's not just about, here's our revenue, here's our profit, which again, a lot of people get in that spot. I've got revenue and I've got profit, but everything is so cyclical. Everything is so elastic, where it's like all of a sudden you don't have that revenue anymore because this thing happened in the market. And if you can future proof yourself better, if you really are planning for how to be better than other people, because you've thought about the customer that way.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I thought you might just say call Proxy.
Well, there's that. You could do that for sure.
Just kidding. That was my shameless plug. All right.
I love it.
Thanks for your input, Tony.
You bet, man. Good to see you. Talk to you later.